Hello, my name is Brian Paone, and I have been a published author since 2007. My 12th novel came out earlier in September, and I've been asked to talk to you guys about the process of self-editing. Everybody is going to have a different way of doing it. There isn't truly a right and a wrong way, it's what you feel comfortable with, but I've been in the business for a long time. I'm also a professional editor, and I have edited almost 700 manuscripts at this point. And when I say manuscripts, that's everything from short stories to novels to novellas and everything in between. So 18 years in the business as a published author, 12 years now as a professional editor. I've been asked to give you guys some tips. We're gonna do this in 3 phases. To self-edit yourself before and then after what happens when you send it to an editor. I personally have 3 drafts before the book goes live to all the stores, gets printed, is released to the world. So I'm going to go over some of those things. I've decided to start my explanation on draft 1 and what you should and shouldn't do while you're writing draft 1 here in my writing office. This has been my writing office now since 2020. I've written my last 5 books in this space that you see, so I thought it was fitting to start here, and we'll move on to different locations as we go into the other 2 drafts. Number 1 for me, and I've told a lot of new authors this, and they seem to like this advice, and it seems to work for them, is do not edit while you're writing that first draft. I don't even go back and fix spelling mistakes. There is something magical about the words coming out as you're typing, dialogue is flowing, action scenes are happening. When you stop and see that you've misspelled the word, I don't know, and maybe use the wrong version of there. If you stop and go back, and I'm going to change that, that's right, I spelled it T-H-E-R-E, and it should be T-H-E-Y''-E-R-E. Even that little bit of interruption into the writing, I find disrupts the flow as an author, and it almost becomes like you've created a mini speed bump, and it's that nanosecond that readers can sometimes pick up on. So I 100% tell you to just move forward and write, and don't worry about spelling mistakes. Don't worry about if you missed a word. You're the author. When we get to the second draft, you're going to know the word you missed. You're going to know the word you misspelled. Move on. So write as fast as your fingers can go. Let it come out. A lot of times punctuation. Who cares about commas at this point? We don't care about commas right now. We don't care about periods. We don't care. Just we're going to write. We're going to write. We're going to write. And this is something that it took me quite a bit of time to be comfortable with on myself while I was writing. I kind of also, when I write, I also have my editor hat on. So it was hard for me to write and not stop and go back and correct something while I was writing. And I was told by people who are way smarter than me in the business, who've been doing it way longer than me, they beat into me like I'm trying to explain to you, don't stop on that first draft. There's something magical that happens when you're writing and that stream of consciousness is coming out. Even if you have an outline, for the people that outline and aren't pantsers, there is still this stream of consciousness that happens when you're writing. And then there's a moment where I like to call it when the characters start writing themselves. And anybody who's ever experienced this moment will know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a moment in every book where the character takes over and your outline might get thrown to the trash bin, right? It's not your book anymore. Your characters own it and they're writing themselves. When this happens, it is very, very important to not stifle their voice by stopping and reading what you just wrote, finishing a paragraph, checking it for grammar or punctuation errors. Also, too, even if you feel like you may have just screwed up your plot and created a plot hole, I also suggest just writing. Get to the end of the chapter. Just keep writing, because you can always go back and fill in the holes. Authors call it sprinting, which is you sitting down and writing and not stopping. And I feel that sprints work really well on that first draft. It is hitting the baseball and just sprinting towards first base. And even if you don't think you're going to get there and you're going to get out, you're still running forward. There are a lot of opportunities to correct what you've written. Also, too, we tend to, even us seasoned authors, fall into a pit of over-describing things. And this is where the second draft really can come into play, and we can work through those like over-flowery descriptions. But I'm going to tell you right now, when the author has written in this forward motion without stopping, without going back and trying to check themselves, the reader can feel that. Especially when you have high emotion scenes. And we're not talking about just high anger or high sadness. We're talking about high excitement or high joy, or anything when there's a level of excitement and anger, or any of the different juxtaposition of emotions have to get risen in the book. It translates when the author doesn't stop writing and writes as if the TV is on and you can't press pause and you're dictating what's going on the screen. And that translates really, really well. The mass amounts of errors and typos and whatever that are in my first draft are almost embarrassing, but that's good, because the more of those I have, the more it proves that I had not stopped writing and I was in the sprint. Writing is a marathon. Publishing is a marathon. We all know that. I find that the first draft is the only part of being an author where it's a sprint. Even if you're writing a 300,000 word high fantasy epic, when you're typing because you're trying to hit the 300-yard dash, in X amount of seconds. That doesn't mean also that you're just letting things fly off the, uncovered trailer and you're like, we'll pick that up later. If you need to pause, then you can pause to formulate your thoughts and move forward. I'm talking about going back and editing what you wrote because of spelling, because of grammar, stuff like that. So don't confuse this with going back and fixing a piece of dialogue because you wanted a character to say something differently. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that, not structural editing, but that like line editing, where a lot of authors tend to want to pause and go back and correct grammatic, punctuation mistakes, okay? Get your first draft done. Keep moving forward. The first draft should always be pushing forward, always be pushing forward. Second draft, this is where we start going in a circular motion. It's like wax on, wax off is your second draft. You start pulling in different things. That's a totally different beast. So here we are. You've written your first draft. It's done. You're at 70,000 words. You gotten to the end. You scroll through whatever program you use. I use Scrivener, but if you use Word or whatever, all the programs have built-in editing software to show you where you've done things wrong. You're gonna go back and go, holy crap, I can't believe how many errors I have. Do not get discouraged. Actually be proud of yourself. That meant that you soldiered on, you got all your thoughts out, and you kept moving forward as an author. But this is where the second draft comes in. I, personally as an author, the second draft is my favorite part of the entire process of being a writer. I love it when my book is done and I have to start over at page 1, chapter 1, line 1, word 1, and now I'm going through my novel, what I wrote, and I start putting it all together, filling the little blanks, finding the plot holes, fixing all the errors. This is where, in my mind, the magic happens, But it only happens if you spent that first draft not looking behind you and looking forward and running towards that finish line. So, second draft's coming up. All right, you finished your first draft, and guess what? You're not out of the woods yet. See what I did here? Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. Took some time thinking about what I was going to do with this, but a lot of authors think, oh, I finished the first draft, and I'm done. The hard part's done. I wrote the book. I hit the end, which I did some research, and what's interesting is they said something like 40% of people think they have a novel in them. That's pretty high. People who have said, yeah, I got a book in me, I could write one. So it's 40%. But only 10% of those 40% sit down to try to write that book. So still a lot of people, right? Then the percentage goes wildly down. So of those people, something like 3% only make it past chapter 3. Something about hitting chapter 3. It tends to be the spot where people decide to give up. And then only like 0.9% of those people hit the end and have a book and say, I've written a novel. So if you take all the people and you do that percentages, you've hit this stage here, what I call, draft 2, the not out of the woods yet draft. You're in the minority, right? So a lot of authors think, shoot, I got to the end of the book. I wrote my book. First draft, it's done. We're done. We're sending this out into the world. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be on bestseller lists and all these things, but your work is not done. Second draft, if you did the first draft like I explained and you just went for it and you sprinted, then no, you start over. You start over. This is the fun part. This is where I think it gets really cool. So now you're reading your book, and you got to switch between being a reader, how the reader's going to hear it, accept it, and also as the author, and looking for all the inconsistencies. Have you created any plot holes? Did you hit all your widgets? Look at your outline. Did the characters do what you wanted them to do? This is where you fix your spelling mistakes. So this is the woods. This is the woods part, right? You're in the office, writing, and now you're out in the wild, and you're making sure you actually have a book that's good, because we can all write a book. Well, most of us, authors can, but is it good? And this is that second draft. I think this is where a book is made or broken, is within that second draft. Did your character, and as an editor, I see this more than you'd ever think. Did your character, Brenda, in chapter 3, have yellow, like blonde hair, and then in chapter 8, she's brushing her black hair. Well, unless you went to the salon and you didn't tell us, why is there a hair change? These are very, very common mistakes that I find that I'm constantly changing. So it's little things like that. And also, too, characteristics and the way people speak. I'm talking about those two things, which I feel is very important when you're doing a second draft. When you're reading your book back to yourself and you're finding all the inconsistencies, sure, you look for your plot holes. Sure, you look for your spelling errors and your punctuation errors and you clean it up. But did you have, in the beginning, your main character start talking with a certain dialect, or start talking with a certain slang, or a certain swagger, and somewhere halfway through, your main character kind of stops talking that way? I see it a lot. Also, too, are all your characters sounding the same? I edited a novel. I'm not going to say the author's name or the title of the book, because there is an editor-client confidentiality that I do keep, where the author had a character that was a brain surgeon, and a character that was a garbage man. Now, I'm not trying to stereotype the education between those two professions, so don't get me wrong here, but everybody in her book, from the brain surgeon down to the garbage man and everyone in between, spoke the exact same way. Where if there was a room of people and she didn't have dialogue tags, I had no idea what they were saying. This is another thing you want to do on your second draft. You want to go through and make sure that your main characters have their specific voice and that it doesn't change throughout the book. That they don't lose kind of the way they speak, the way they talk. So that's also very important. That's what you want to look for in your second draft. And also to behaviors. We all know that we can change. We all know that we can go through different events in life that change the way we behave. But if your characters haven't gone through these life-changing events, would something your character would never do in the beginning all of a sudden start doing at the end of the book? And that is something else that I find that I've seen as an editor, where I have to write to the author and go, yeah, Jim would never do this. Like, the reader's gonna not believe you. It's just that it's too far-fetched. So draft 2, I love because you have the book. The book is there. The book is done. Now we're cleaning it up. We're making sure all the characters are staying in line. We're making sure that all the dialogue is right. We're making sure that it flows for the reader. We're making sure that we have some excitement and a little taste of a cliffhanger maybe at the end of each chapter. This is where your book becomes something consumable for a reader that they're going to love and they're going to enjoy, and hopefully like enough that the next time you publish a book, they'll be there waiting to give you money and want to read it and put it to the top of their to-be-read list because you proved that your book is solid. And that happens in the second draft. So do not do that in the first draft. First draft is a sprint, right? It's your running. Let's get to the finish line. Let's get it all down. Second draft is where the magic happens. We're talking about the third draft. I got a special location. We're going to talk about that. All right, you finished your second draft. You've sent it off to your editor. This is what I suggest if you don't use beta readers. If you do use beta readers after your second draft, that is the appropriate time to send it off to the beta readers, get their critiques, take back their different suggestions, internalize it, decide what you're going to change. This is all still the second draft. Even beta readers coming back and giving you their critiques, if you implement any of those, we're still in the second draft world. Second draft is pretty broad. You're going to be in it for a while, especially if you use those readers. I use beta readers up through my third novel, and then I stopped. This is a personal opinion. Again, I am not going to preach this, teach this, or whatever. This is up to you. I found that my beta readers were giving me suggestions because of things they didn't personally like, and that's not their job. A good beta reader's job is to tell you where your plot hole is. They're supposed to be objective, tell you if a character's dialogue it feels stiff. I started to get things like, well, I didn't like that so-and-so did this to that person. That's not your job. The moment I realized I was done with beta readers was when I got some critique back who said, I think this main character's name should be this name. Their literal critique of my novel was that they didn't like my main character's first name and wanted me to change it to some other name. That would be like somebody telling you, if you had kids, that I don't like little Mikey's name. He should be a Henry. So I was like, you know what? I'm done. But if you love beta readers, awesome. Finding a good one is worth its weight in gold. But this is all in the second draft. We're still in the second draft, even if you use beta readers. Now, I'm also going to preach that finding an editor that you work in symbiosis with is unbelievably good for your career. I attribute it to, I was in bands for 20 years, released a couple albums, toured for years, and I think that an author finding the right editor is kind of like a drummer and a bass player who have played together for so long, who fit so well, that without even looking at each other, the bass player could do something and the drummer can feel that it's about to happen, and the drummer hits the appropriate fill, and everything is locked and just in time. It's the backbone. So I implore you that if you find an editor that you work well with, don't think the grass is greener somewhere else. Keep them and work with them, because every book that you release with that editor, that relationship grows. They're going to know you a little bit more. My editor has edited 11 of my 12 novels. And you're going to say, well, Brian, why is there that odd novel out? Well, my editor didn't edit my historical war romance novel, The Post-War Dream, because it takes place 100% in England. She's an American editor, and I even had a conversation with her. I said, Denise, I'm going to hire a British editor. I want to make sure I get the vernacular right. I want to make sure I get the nuances right. I want to make sure that the tone is there, because the entire novel takes place in England and all my characters are British. And she was like, I love that. I want those things for your career. And that's another good thing you want to find with an editor, where you can look at them and say, you know what? You're not really good at whatever genre, and this book is kind of in this genre, so I'm going to find an editor just for this book, and having an editor that's not going to take it personally. Now, so you've sent your second draft to your editor, who you trust and you love, and they send it back. This is where we blast off into the future. So I'm going to go ahead and sit in my trusty DeLorean to talk about what I call the third draft. Third draft is simple. You've sent your book to your editor. It's like dropping your kid off at kindergarten. You've released it for the first time to another professional, right? So yeah, sure, when you have a baby, you might get babysitters, right? You might get the family member here and there, the neighbor who's gonna watch your kid. But when you drop your child off to kindergarten, those are professional caretakers. So giving your book, your manuscript to your editor, that's the first time that a professional is getting their hands in it. And it's always scary. I know every time I hit send, I've been published for 18 years, 12 novels, and I still go, oh God, is she gonna take care of my book? But I trust her. When she or he, I'm gonna say she because my editor is a female. When she returns my book to me, that starts what I call the third draft. Third draft is taking all of her corrections and suggestions, and what I do is I do a split screen on my computer. I have my original document on the left side, and I have her corrected with all the red that looks like a goat was slaughtered all over Microsoft Word on the right. And I go line by line, and I look at every one of her corrections. Let me hammer this home. Your editor's job is to make your book the best book it can be, grammatically, punctuation, pleonasms, passive voice, damning participles, all of these things, right? All these things where there is rules where we either use Chicago Manual of Style or whatever. Their job is to implement the rules into your manuscript. The thing that I always say is you need to know the rules before you can break them. Yes, we're artists at the end of the day. Yes, not everybody speaks in perfect active voice, but a good editor should give you the suggestion of what the active voice version of that sounds like, and then you make the decision as the author if that works or not. Again, know the rule, see the rule, and then decide if you want to break it. I don't think that editors and authors who don't know all the rules shouldn't be breaking the rules yet. I've been in the business almost 2 decades, and I find that the authors who hire editors, where neither of them want to implement the rules and then decide if they want to break them, I feel like those are the books that tend to sound like they just ramble on, and there's a lot of clunky sentences and awkwardness within dialogue. So if we can implement the rules of grammar and punctuation, then we take a step back and go, okay, I have my two versions of it. I'm gonna pick which one I like, but at least I get to pick between the two. I know what the rule is. I know which one I'm gonna use. I use about 90% of my editor's suggestions. There are times when she implements perfect grammatical rule into a sentence, and I go, yeah, but it's just gotta be a little bit more loose than that. And that's when breaking the rules comes in. And I hear a lot of new authors who say, well, I'm not gonna follow the rules. I'm an artist, and writing shouldn't have rules, and it should be, my emotions and what I feel. I get that. I'm actually on board with that, but only after you know what the rules that you're breaking are. So the third draft, you've gotten it back from your editor. Like I said, I go side by side, and I go through every line. I go through every punctuation. I go through every red mark. And a lot of times, if you have a good editor, if I was having a hard time trying to figure out what I wanted to say in a paragraph, like I knew what I was trying to get at, like I understood the point. And my editor knows me so well that she understood what I was trying to get to, but also recognized that I wasn't really using the right words to do it. She'll go ahead and almost rewrite the paragraph using my own adjectives, my own this. She doesn't change my tone or my voice. And sometimes I read it and go, oh my God, yep, that's exactly what I meant. And I love that she has the ability to do that. Also, find an editor who doesn't change your voice as an author. Don't hire an editor and you become a chameleon with the way that they speak or talk. It's very, very important to find an editor who matches or doesn't change your voice, because your voice as an author is so important to your brand. And branding is a whole nother presentation I can give. But if you can brand yourself, it allows you to write in any and every genre. You won't be pigeonholed to a genre because you've proven that you've created a brand that people can trust, that people, when they read, like to read. The joke is with me is that I'm an author who doesn't know how to stay in his lane, because I have a time travel novel, an urban crime thriller, a historical war romance novel, supernatural crime noir trilogy, ghost hunt gone wrong novel, a werewolf novel, a novel about a fan befriending a rock star who's a drug addict. I'm wildly all over the place. I have a cyberpunk dystopian novel. There is no lane for me. But what I made sure was that in all of my books, my voice and the tone are the same. So my readers, doesn't matter that I switch genres, they know they're still getting on brand my tone and my voice. This goes back to editing. Having an editor, finding an editor who's not going to change your voice, who understands your voice and your tone, even if you're dabbling in other genres. If you start to sway outside of that, they know where your boundaries are, and they kind of can reel you back in and go, yeah, this is, you kind of went off the grid here with this description. Let's reel you back in. So again, I'm going to employ to find a good editor. So that is my third draft. So my first draft is the sprint. We are full steam ahead. I'm not looking back. Stuff's flying off the page. Typos be damned. The second draft, meticulous, plot holes get filled. I make sure all of my characters have a different voice from each other. if you have beta readers, they read it, there's critiques. This is the shaping, the molding. Third draft is when you get it back from your editor and you go through and you pick and choose what you think works for your book and what doesn't. And I'm going to tell you, if you can go through those and you can stay on course, you're going to be so happy with your book. I'm going to tell you, when you're happy with your book, you're going to sell it with enthusiasm, and your readers are going to be happy with your book. And it's going to be infectious. There's nothing better than giving an elevator pitch at a convention or a festival where you are so proud of the book that you have in your hand, and it just comes off of you, and other people get excited. That is winning, and that is how we become a successful author, when you need to self-edit prior to the editor and then after you get it back from your editor. If you have any questions, I know this is pre-recorded video, but you can find me. My website is myname.com, so brianpaone.com. It's not like myname.com, that would be silly. But I am on all social medias, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. It's Brian with an I, last name is Paone. I'm very searchable. You can Google me, and I will answer any and all questions that come my way. And I hope you don't hesitate reaching out to me if you have any questions. Also, too, if you're local, I am part of the con circuit. I'm always doing book festivals and conventions. And if you see me in person, please come up and ask me anything you want. I love talking about this stuff. And last but not least, I'm going to let you know that this DeLorean that I'm sitting in was paid for 100%, every penny, from book sale royalties of my first 4 novels. So, I'll tell you right now, if you have a dream and there's something you want, it's out there. If you told me 20 years ago that I would own my dream car, paid for completely by book sale royalties for my first 4 published novels, I would have told you that you were crazy. But you're not crazy, you're just an author, which means you're double crazy. Ha! See what I did there? All right, catch you on the flip side. Bye, everybody.